Alright, hey guys. So today's video is going to be a little different. Today I'm actually taking a live from my Facebook group and I'm just going to talk over as far as what I'm doing. So I'm going to be doing etching glass today. So I'm using a shot glass that I already had in my cabinet and a brand new wine glass. So some things you're going to need are the Armour Etch cream. That's what I'm going to use to actually etch my glass today. You're also going to need a stick to get your etch cream out because it can be a little messy. I'm going to apply my etching cream with a sponge brush. You need something that you can dab, so I do not recommend a paintbrush. And I don't recommend a paintbrush because it can smear onto the glass and I want it to just dab onto the glass. You'll also need some painter's tape. It doesn't have to be the blue scotch tape. It can be some masking tape or whatever you may have around the house just to build a barrier from your decal of your stencil and the glass. Okay, so I've cut out my stencil that I'm going to be using on my glasses using my Cricut Maker and some Oracle 651 permanent vinyl. I use permanent vinyl versus stencil vinyl because I noticed that the stencil vinyl moved around a lot and I don't want my vinyl to lift when I'm putting my etching cream on because then you may run into the problem of it leaking underneath and giving you a not so good outcome with your etching cream. So I'm going to cut a perfect, well, what I call perfect square around my design. And instead of weeding the vinyl like you usually would, I'm going to weed reverse. So I'm going to actually take out the design and leave the background there, as you can see here. Alrighty, so now that I have my stencils all weeded out, I'm now going to clean my surface using 91% alcohol. And I'm now going to place my stencils onto my glass using transfer tape. So with the transfer tape method, it's the same way as if you were to be putting this down to leave as if it's your final design. I'm just going to take it up and then put it on my glass. When I do this method, I want to make sure that I can see where my stencil is going to land because remember, this is not going to stay on the glass. It's just there so we can stencil in our etching cream. So I take my time with this part to make sure that it's laying where I want it to lay. And if it doesn't, I'm not going to press it down too far so that I can pull it up if I don't like its placement. So once I find the placement that I like, I'm going to scrape it down with using my scraper tool, and I'm focusing a lot on the actual letters inside of my stencil because I want to make sure it's flat, because if it's not flat, it will leak through your stencil and it will show through the etching cream. And as you all know, etching cream is 100% permanent. There's no taking it away. So once it leaks, it just leaks. We can't go back and fix it. So to avoid any of that, I'm just going to make sure I press down super hard on that stencil. And that's what it looks like. So that one is actually ready to be etched. I'm going to move on to my next stencil, and I'm just going to fast forward just a little bit so we can get to the next part. Okay, so when using a round surface, you definitely want to be careful with your stencil. So notice how my stencil bubbled up at the bottom. Only thing I care about is my letters. So where there's no letters, I don't care if it bubbles up because remember, this is just a stencil, it's coming up. So, and the reason that it bubbled up like that is because it is on a round surface, and this would be a way too big of a decal if I was leaving that on that glass. So it's okay if it happens, just make sure that your letters where your cream will go is nice and pressed down so you will not get any leaking. So now I'm going to take my etching cream out of the jar and put it onto some leftover transfer paper. And I'd like to do it this way because I don't have to worry about trying to stick this entire sponge brush in here and making a big mess. And I just take out a little bit that I think I'll need, and if I need more, I can go back in and get more. The best thing about etching cream is if you use too much, you can always put it back in your jar. I kind of go overload on when I'm putting it on my surface to make sure that it gets good coverage in that stencil. And if you want, you can go back once it's dry and it's been sitting for about an hour. You can scrape it off and put it back in your jar, or you can just rinse it off. It's really up to you. So right here, I started applying the cream and then I realized, oh no, I forgot my scotch tape. So I'm just going back and I'm showing you how to put your scotch tape on as a barrier to keep your etching cream from leaking out of that stencil too much, because I did have glasses before where I didn't create a barrier and for some reason there would be like a little bit of etching cream at the top of the stencil where I didn't even put cream in. I don't know how that happened. It could have been leaking or whatever the case may be, but this is a sure way to stop any of that from happening. So I just outlined the whole stencil with scotch tape just to protect it, just to protect that outlaying glass from the etching cream. Like with here, this letter is so close to the end that could definitely leak out if that stencil was not pressed down all the way. Okay, so now I can go back to adding my etching cream into all of the letters, and you want to use a nice thick layer when applying the etching cream into your stencil just to make sure that you're going to get good coverage, because once it's on there, I really don't recommend going back after you started to let it sit, and then of course you won't know if it's a good coverage until you remove your stencil and you rinse it off, and by then it'll be too late to go back anyway. So to avoid any of that from happening, you just want to put a thick layer on there. And like I said, if you're worried about using too much, you can always go back and scrape it off and put it back into your container before you go to do your reveal. Okay, so with my shot glass, I know you're probably wondering, Dee, why didn't you put the scotch tape on this one to outline this decal? And because my decal was so wide, I honestly forgot, but because it was so wide, I didn't go back to edit because I knew it would be okay. I knew that there was nothing close to the edge on this one, so I did take a chance, but I can promise you the outcome, it was okay. So I didn't have to worry about the bleeding in this instant, but I do recommend just adding your scotch tape, because if you accidentally dab a piece of etching cream on that glass somewhere, it's going to show. So my apologies for not putting the scotch tape on there, but you could, if you're safe. If you worried about it, I would definitely add it. Okay, so from here, this is where we let the etching cream do all of the work. So I usually let my etching cream sit for at least an hour, only because I would hate to have done all of this and it's just not what I'm looking for. So the longer you let it sit, the more definition that you'll see with your etching. Now, I will say this, when we go to rinse it off, and you'll see that later, it will look like there's nothing there, but no worries, we have to dry it first and then it'll look like magic has taken place. So I'm going to show you now what it's like when we reveal it after we let it sit. I think I let this one sit for about honestly 4 hours. Sometimes I can forget, which is no problem. I have let it sit overnight before on accident and it came out perfectly fine, so it's not going to ruin it. So it's really up to you. I definitely would recommend not going under an hour though if you want to get that good coverage. Alrighty, so now it's time to rinse off our etching cream. I did not scrape this etching cream off back into my jar because I don't think I used too much, so it's perfectly fine. So I'm just going to go in with my sponge brush and lightly rub off all of the etching cream. I'm using some room temperature water. I think I have it like right in between hot and cold. I haven't realized if it makes a huge difference, so I just turn the sink on and let it run while I am scrubbing that off. And then I'm going to turn the water off and I'm just going to pull off my stencil. In no fancy way, I'm just taking it off. It's done its job and that's going right to the trash. So like I told you before, remember how I said it would look like it's nothing there? But once you dry it off and your etching cream or your etched glass is dry, you'll then start to see your design. And y'all, this stuff is amazing. It comes out looking like $1,000,000. And lo and behold, the etching cream does all the work. You just apply it the right way. So I love this method. It comes out very chic, very classy, perfect for glasses that are going in your bar or if you're putting something on display. I've also done memorial glass boxes with etching cream. Etching cream there's no limit to what you can do with it. Once you learn how to use it and you're making sure that you're pressing down on those stencils to keep it from leaking, you will not be able to stop. If it's glass, you can etch it, I promise you. And once it's dry, that's literally it. It's ready for use. It doesn't have to cure or anything like that. So if you enjoyed this video, if you learned something new, make sure you mention it in the comments. And be sure to hit that subscribe button and that bell so you never miss any new content that I'm uploading. Thank you so much for watching, you all. And remember, stay crafty.